Welcome, everybody. A big house here today. I can't understand why, but let's do the rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call. All board members are present tonight except for Mr. Rossi, who is unfortunately ill, and we hope not seriously ill. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Fiola.
Thank you, Mr. Rabinowitz. Tonight I have the pleasure of honoring our boys soccer team who are here with us this evening. Thank you so much for coming out and spending the evening with us at a board meeting. I guarantee you can go home after this. Just give me 5 minutes. I wanted to say a couple of words about the team. Under the direction of Coach Jay Witkowski, Jeff Erb, and Kevin Grimm, our boys have had a tremendous season. They won the Frontier Division and earned a spot in the Pioneer Athletic Conference Final Four Championships. They had an overall record of 13 wins and 10 losses, with 6 of those losses coming against schools that were twice our enrollment. They beat the state championship, the defending state championship, Holy Ghost Prep, in the second round of the district playoffs. I think we were at a board meeting that night. We were getting texts about your game. Then we went on to defeat Bishop Stranahan 2-1 in the PIAA District 1 AA playoffs and qualified for the PIAA State Team Championships, eventually losing to Northwestern Lehigh. So this evening I wanted to congratulate all of you, and I'm going to read each one of your names, and I'd like the whole team to come up, and I would like to present you with a plaque for the PIAA District 1 AA champions and the PIAA state qualifiers for soccer. So congratulations to all of you. So guys, why don't you come up and as I read your names, and accept a certificate on behalf of the school board and Mr. Rabinowitz, our board president, that will be presenting that to you. Okay. Yeah. So the first thing we'll do is we'll read each player's name, and we have a certificate for you, starting with Liam, please, I hope I don't butcher anybody's name, Liam Abdallah. Come on up, Liam. Nice job. Ryan Long. Ben Nat. Noah Lear. Nathan Miller. Claudio Paez. Justin Toth. Tyler Van Horn. Brian Chinchilla. Nicholas Kernu. David Desormy. Bill Kaiser. Jared Krieger. Nicholas Macoyd. Dylan Marchese. Patrick O'Brien. Tyler Rolando. Jacob Spatz. Nathan Uchimia. Eli Eisenhower. Nathan Casper. Michael Serenish. And I want to make sure that we honor our coaches, Mr. Jay Witkowski, Jeff Burke, Kevin Grant.
All right, great, thank you. First of all, we'd like to thank all you guys for the support for the athletics and the soccer team this year. And Will Kaiser actually has something to say. Represent the team.
On behalf of the boys soccer team, we would like to thank you for the support, the plaques, and the jackets that we will soon be receiving. And we would like to ask if you would please display this in the district office.
It would be our pleasure. Thank you so much.
I just want to say one thing. When I look at all the boys here, when I was diagnosed with cancer 6 years ago, this group of boys have gotten together, and every year we have a Friends Helping Friends tournament. And you guys melt my heart, and it goes on and off the field with what they do. They help and they care for others. And today, mentioning sports, the football captains came with me to the Cancer Center with Mr. Dorenzo and gave a donation. So it goes with athletics, what they learn from their coaches takes on off the field. So thank you, parents, and thank you, kids.
All of a sudden, it got very quiet here. So next is a public comment, but before I call the one individual who put a card in, I wanted to let her know that the issue that she wants to speak to us about is going to be discussed a little bit later. So my suggestion to you is to hold off until we have our discussion, and then if you want to make comment afterwards, please feel free to do so. Are you okay with that? Grace?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Doesn't seem like there's much public left. And then I want to announce that the board met in executive session this evening for personnel matters which were to review certain performance issues. And the board will be meeting after the meeting tonight to continue that discussion and also to discuss labor negotiations with the non-professional organized staff. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the board meeting on January 12th, 16? So moved. Motion, do I have a second? Motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries 9-0. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the board meeting from January 26, 16? Motion. Can I have a second? Second. Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Let's move to receiving of a, what's it?
8-0.
I'm saying 9-0, but it's 8-0. I've been corrected. Then receiving of accounts for audit.
I move that we accept the high school accounts, middle school accounts, and cafeteria accounts as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 8-0.
I move that we approve the payments of invoices in the amount of $6,476,245.09 for January 2016 as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
I move that we approve the treasurer's report for January 2016 as presented and file it for audit.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. That it, Patty? Let's move to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Rabinowitz, and we're going to start this evening by a report of our student board rep, and I'm sure he's going to have a lot to say this evening, and I won't steal his thunder, but I do have to say I had a wonderful couple of hours with he and Mrs. Custer and Dr. Ziegler today as we visited Pottstown, and I'll leave the rest to Dominique.
All right, good evening, everyone. Just start the report out. In the beginning of this month, West Pottsgrove Elementary children learned about Groundhog Day. They made predictions if he would see his shadow or not. They also worked through the mid-year testing in reading. This past Saturday, the PTA is sponsored a bowling event at Limerick Bowling Alley. This past week, they celebrated Valentine's Day by exchanging Valentines with their classmates and will be gearing up to celebrate the 100th day of school on February 18th, tomorrow. with many fun activities around the number 100. Ringing Rocks Elementary kicked off the new book of the month as they focus on the importance of fairness. They are in the middle of conducting reading benchmark assessments, and the reading specialists are pleased with the preliminary results. Students enjoyed learning about Groundhog's Day with a variety of engaging activities. Over the next few weeks, they will continue to learn about American presidents, dental health, and Black history. They're looking forward to 100th day of school as teachers use this special day to reinforce mathematical concepts in creative and meaningful ways for students. On January 27th and 28th, Lower Pottsgrove Elementary hosted friends and families for the beginning band and orchestra concerts. The students worked very hard to prepare, and it was well attended. Lower Pottsgrove students brought their Someone Special to their dances on January 29th and 30th. The boys had their event on Friday and the girls on Saturday. Students danced, played games, and had fun with their loved ones. On Saturday, February 6th, the elementary PTAs sponsored the second annual bowling bash. Fifth grade student leaders are looking forward to having spring spirit days. Pottsgrove Middle School was voting Super Bowl favorites through exercises and the Fuel Up to Play 60 program. Students have the option each morning to cast their vote and add the tally based on the daily exercise. Additionally, student government hosted the annual King and Queen Heart of Heart Dance, which was a well-attended event with lots of school spirit. They began with winter intramurals and revisited the school-wide positive behavior lessons using the Falcon 4 principles to create a safe, positive, respectful, and responsible learning community. High school students finished up midterm exams and started the third marking period this month. The AP STEM dual enrollment night took place and course selections has started for next school year. Good luck to our girls basketball team as they compete in the Pac-10 Final Four. There was a parent scheduling night for incoming 9th graders this month. The SAT boot camp is coming to Pottsgrove High School on February 29th and 28th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Now moving on to the events that happened at Pottstown today when me, Mrs. Fuel, Mrs. Custer, Dr. Ziegler, and Mr. Dorenzo all went over to meet with their students and their representatives. We were a bit spoiled by the culinary students and the meal they prepared for us. Following lunch and more icebreaker conversations, such as why did we want to be a part of why did we want to be student representatives and how the system went about. We sat down and talked about their student representative systems are run and how ours are run. I got a lot of needed information and ideas from them to better my role and the future role for the student representatives in Pottsgrove. After our discussion, I see that I'm accessible to students by way of email and by physical and personal interactions. However, I can better the ways that I inform a wider variety of students about the events that happen at the school board. Like I need to develop another system or ways to get it out to people other than always technology or social media. Something that was actually brought to me by one of the students via email was there was a concern with the change in weighting scale from our classic 80% for test and then 20 for homework to 90 and 10% now. That was brought to me, but it was to my understanding that the reason the switch was for so we could better stand up and compare to colleges, because I'm pretty sure that's how the colleges weight their tests and homework and whatnot. And there will always be kids on both sides of that spectrum. Some feel tests should weigh more, some feels homework should weigh more, but that was something brought up to me. We came up with the realization that I should take more trips to the actual physical schools and actually talk with the kids in the schools, whether they be little first graders, second graders or not. They should still see that in the high school and as they grow, the opportunity to get more involved in what the school actually does and the decision makings, that they can look forward to that. They can look forward to the opportunity to do so. And that's about it.
Mrs. Custer, you were there. Do you have anything you'd like to add about the lunch meeting?
Yeah, it was a great afternoon. I think we all walked away feeling good about what we're doing, but yet knowing that we can do more. And I think it is of the utmost importance that we, going forward, have two representatives on the board. I think a junior and a senior. And Dom and I were talking about it on the way home with Mr. Dorenzo, and we were saying how it would really help to have the juniors sort of learning the ropes, so that when they become the senior rep, they know what they're doing. Whereas when Dom started, it took him a couple months to get his feet wet, and he actually still is. And probably by the time he really gets comfortable is when he'll be leaving. And so I really hope that hopefully starting, next fall, we can have a junior and a senior rep, and really get them involved. So Pottstown really has a nice program going there, and I felt very welcome. They were really, really awesome to us today.
I have a question. Maybe Dom or Ashley knows the answer, or maybe you know the answer. How long has the Pottstown Student Rep Program been in place in its current form? Does anybody know?
I think they said 3 years. This is their third year, I believe. Isn't that
So-
right?
So
Yeah.
I like that we're trying to learn from someone who's been who's a little bit ahead of us. I'll also point out that our outgoing board rep last year recommended the same thing, that we go to 2 student reps. So I would like to see us consider that idea in whatever the appropriate format is, as well as learning whatever else we can glean from their successful program. So.
If there's support for it, Mr. Rabinowitz, we would need that guidance because we'd have to amend our board policy.
Maybe it would be appropriate to discuss in policy committee then. All right then.
The second, oh, you finished, Dom? Okay. Yeah, and I wanted to thank Dom for his candor today in talking about our program and how he's grown, and just his ability to interact. We had four students from Pottstown, and they were very gracious to us, but it's always hard walking into a new situation with brand new people, and Dom handled it with ease, and we just had a really nice conversation with all of them. And actually we're tweeting with each other now because Ms. Viola is trying to get into the 21st century. I'm starting my tweets, and so now their student board reps tweeting back, and we're kind of sharing ideas, and we were able to get some of that going today, so that was nice. Moving on to the high school renovation phase change request, I had given you some information in your packet, and obviously you're aware through some previous conversations that we had that we're interested in amending phase 5 of the high school renovation project in order to begin this renovation earlier in several sections, because we think that proactively that then gives us the best chance of completing the project on time should any unforeseen circumstances arise. So we took a look at this and how we would do it, and Mr. Cardwell put together this Gantt chart for you to look at, and you can see pieces of the phase that we would like to expedite and start early, and that would be the phase 5 of the auditorium and phase 5 of the district office. And the reason that we chose those 2 pieces is because we believe we can work around that, in that we wouldn't start the auditorium until after the spring play. We'd relocate all of the activities that are happening in that auditorium after the spring play. We have identified how we would relocate those. And some of the things that are happening right now in that back section by the social studies wing will be completed. The teachers that are in the LGIs can move back into their spaces, which will open up the LGIs so that we can then move the study halls from the auditorium into those spaces. And that's with minimal disruption to students, and probably a benefit for students to be in a smaller setting than in the auditorium for study hall. In addition to that, we're recommending the district office because we don't have to interrupt students in what's happening in their educational process, and also we'll be able to get back in the district office and not have to move twice, which is what we're worried about, because in the summer, obviously the last thing that we'll look to complete would be the district office, and if we're not finished there, then we'll have to locate somewhere else later, and there might not be space for that. Right now, we have a unique situation in that the guidance suite is essentially almost complete. It will be complete by mid-March, and once they turn that suite over to us, we weren't planning on opening that back up to the high school until next fall, so it's just sitting idle because the part of the lobby of the high school is in that renovation process and still has a wooden wall that's not set to come down until the summer when they finish the terrazzo floor. So there's space in that section where we could move over there now in mid-March to allow the construction to start in the district office in April, as well as the auditorium. The lion's share of the district office staff would go into that space. The pupil services department, including the child accounting, which is child registration, would go to West in those additional spaces, and that would allow us student registration and parking for that, and also ample space to be able to meet with parents for special education and those types of student services. And then the district office staff, the rest of us would be essentially in that guidance area, kind of pairing up and sharing together. And Dave and I worked with Jeff to develop a plan for that, and that's what I articulated in the memo. As you're aware, in going through our other phases, we felt that it's really insistent that we have a change order executed in order to ensure that all 4 primes clearly understand our expectation and our timelines. So we were able to get the primes to buy into this concept. They've signed off on the change orders, and should you be in agreement with expediting this phase, then we would be asking you to recommend, or we would be recommending that you approve the change orders that I have here tonight, which essentially articulate enhancing or the start time of the renovation, and then having the completion time in June as I presented. So that would be change order request 012, 018, 036, and 109. Each is with its own prime to ensure that they understand the expectations, and then we don't run into a situation later where they're delaying.
Does anybody, those change orders are not on our action items, correct?
No, I didn't know if, we really do need these approved this month, so it could be next week. I wanted to make sure that I had a chance to talk with you about the scenario, and it could either be approved this evening or next Tuesday. I can put it back on the agenda, but we just want to be able to get going on it and make sure our plan is tight.
Well, I think the broad concept was already presented to us at a previous meeting, so I'm personally comfortable with approving them now. The only question that I have on this is, have all the affected personnel been apprised as to the changes that it will mean for them, the people who are moving to West, the people who are moving to the high school? Anybody else? Are all affected staff fully informed at this point?
They're fully informed. Dave and I sat with every employee in the district office and went through the whole scenario. Mrs. Kohler, we met with Mrs. Kohler to work on West Pottsgrove, and Dr. Ziegler for the high school. So everyone's aware, and I think even the staff at both the high school and West Pottsgrove have been alerted of the possibility of this as well.
And again, just to reiterate, we think that this is the best move to get to the end of the summer and have a finished high school project, and that if we don't do this, that possibility is greatly diminished. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, so does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Real quick, just a question. With this whole change order, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to be scheduling and recommending that we're going to be starting school on time?
Well, that's obviously still in the plan, is to start on time. The only thing that what happened last year was we had some unforeseen conditions that necessitated additional time. And then when you have to provide the additional time because it's unforeseen to the prime, it was really the owner's responsibility, even though we couldn't have identified that there was asbestos or there was mold or whatever, the issues that we came across over that period of time. So though there may be some unforeseen conditions that might delay somewhat, this is kind of getting us a jump start on things in a proactive measure to give us a little bit more time should those things arise.
I think Al may have been, I think the definition of on time is also a question that might have been on your mind. In other words, are we planning on starting school after Labor Day as we planned to last year? Of course, we then started later at the high school. Or are we planning on starting school as we previously traditionally did the week before Labor Day?
Well, I've been working on the calendar, and today I met with the leadership team, and we took a look at it, and once we're going to clean up a couple of things, and I want to share it with the full cabinet, and I always work with the teachers union. But essentially, the recommendation is to start after Labor Day because that additional week is imperative and of importance to have in a construction project of this magnitude, and there's a lot that's going on in the summer. So that would be our recommendation. Obviously, the board can approve whatever calendar you would like, but we're going to bring forth a calendar that begins after Labor Day, again, this year.
So late.
Not late. We have it slated for the day after Labor Day, Mr. Leach, not a
You
week
can
after.
call it anything you want. To me, that's late.
Well, there's a
Well-
lot of schools that start after Labor Day. That's pretty, and actually, I was working on my counterparts because I got some feedback through the community that some parents really enjoyed the after Labor Day start, and maybe you could follow that up with your students there, Dom. And I saw a draft from Springford, and I'm almost certain that their draft, because it just came this afternoon, is after Labor Day as well, but don't quote me on that. Don't tweet that, please. But I think it's kind of been a conversation among more than just one school district. But I'd be happy to share with you calendars that I'm collecting through some of the districts, but.
Yeah, we can talk about this when we debate the calendar. I will say that there's interesting evidence that suggests starting early has some benefits as well, though that certainly has some unintended as well. So as it relates to the high school project, though, I agree with Mrs. Fiola, given what happened last summer, and the unforeseen things that happened. Our start of school might have been on time because we had that extra week. And hopefully with this change that we're about to approve, we'll be in good shape to have not only a finished project, but a nice clean building for everybody to move into on the day after Labor Day. And so, we'll discuss it more when the calendar comes up, which I think might be at the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. I know a lot of the public are very interested in this because they're trying to make vacation plans. So,
I have a question and a comment. Regarding the delay in school last year. My understanding as a non-school board member at the time, was that there were unforeseen circumstances. But my understanding is that they were also known for a period of time before there was a request for overtime. So the perception that I had at the time as a non-school board member was there was also poor planning involved on whoever from the, on the construction side of things, that I trust won't be happening again this year. My question in regards to these change orders that we don't have a copy of, is there a cost issue with that, or just
No,
time?
there's no cost to it. The only thing the change order does is just change the start and the end time. That's all.
I'm comfortable voting for it tonight if that's a desire.
I have a quick question, and this is regarding the high school renovation. You're talking about moving everything, ahead, which is great, but are they going to take care of some of the existing issues? I was told that yesterday one of the girls' bathrooms flooded. I was told today when we were walking out to go to lunch that ice had fallen from the roof right onto the walkway where the students walk in and out in the morning, I mean, that has to be taken care of, like,
You're right, Mrs. Custer. We've had some significant issues with the roofing, and Mr. Cardwell's been right on top of it, and I'd rather have him give you an update because he has the detail and the follow-through that we've been doing just this week. So you want to grab that, turn that mic on, Jeff. So-
Much of the roofing issues that we're experiencing at the high school are areas where the roof, it's the old roof. It's areas that we still have to put a new roof on. So for instance, the girls' restroom at the bus lobby, that's an existing roof. That work won't get done until this summer. The high school, the district office and the high school office are existing roofs that have not been prepared yet to receive the new membrane roof that we're putting on. We did have some leaks in roofing areas that received our new roof that have been addressed, and the roofing company was scheduled to come out Friday just past, Saturday and Monday, but due to the weather, they were unable to do any roofing work. This Saturday, they will be out to make some minor repairs to the old roofs and the new roofs that we have found some issues in the building.
what about the ice falling from the roof? I mean, honestly, the kids can handle a few drips coming out of the ceiling, I mean, but that, you know, Dom was telling me about how he was walking by and a big hunk of ice came down and hit the walkway, and that's, I mean, is that, yeah, I mean, he said he witnessed it, and that to me, I mean, that could kill somebody, you know, and that was coming from pretty high.
It was off of the, I believe not I believe, but the gym, the slant. Yeah. Is that not a new roof? Or?
That is new, and the design of it, as you know, is an arching roof. It actually has snow cleats on the roof to capture any snow or ice that's going to fall off. It still will fall to the ground. Those snow cleats slow the momentum of the ice and also breaks it up to smaller pieces, so you're not having a sheet of ice coming down. I did witness myself some of the ice material coming down. It was really a heavy slush material. That is something I will speak to our architect and the roofing company that we may not have put up enough of the snow cleats to slow the travel of material coming off the roof there.
I have to concur. Let's do whatever we can to make sure that there's no risk to people walking by the gym, right?
Absolutely.
Because while we may be done with ice for this year, let's cross our fingers, this is going to be an ongoing thing. So if there are no more questions, let's go through these motions. So I make a motion to approve change order requests 012, 018, 036, and 109 for the Pottsgrove High School renovation project at no additional cost as presented. Motion, I need a second. Motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions?
Just a comment, again, I've said in the past, I'll say it again, anything we're voting on, I understand there's no cost involved, so I'll be voting yes, but, and I apologize if we do have a copy, but I'd like to see a copy before we vote.
Summarized it in my memorandum to you, but I can get you a copy. It's not a problem.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah, this goes with, I have to get the signature from Dave. Thanks. we're going to table the gifted concerns and recommendations this evening, and we're going to move on to budget update, and I'm going to have Dave start that conversation with you.
Can I ask a question regarding that, tabling that? We're tabling that to next month, so there's not going to be any discussion regarding program for the gifted in the public meeting?
There will be, but at the next public meeting.
Okay, I'm just going to have to talk loud because the portable mic battery has died. So last Tuesday, we watched the governor's annual budget address. And it was very interesting because he spoke for about 25 minutes and didn't say anything about the 2016-17 budget. Basically, it was a plea to General Assembly to come back and work on the 15-16 budget. So I think any discussion of next year's budget has to start with where we are this year. I guess I got to turn this on first. That always helps. Okay. There's two major components of the current budget that are not resolved. In December, there was a presentation, or a meeting of minds, if you will, between the Senate, the House, and the governor on what they called a framework budget. And that framework budget called for an additional funding for public education of $377 million. After everybody agreed to that, they went back to their respective houses to approve budgets. And the Pennsylvania House chose not to accept that and presented their version of the budget to the governor for approval, which was unbalanced and at a much lower level. I think it proposed $100 million increase in money. So the governor chose not, his choice at that point in time was to veto the entire budget and start over, or blue line vote, which is essentially a line item veto. And what he did was he line itemed certain components of the budget. Only one that really significantly impacts us, which is the basic ed funding, basic ed subsidies. And where he blue lined that is to give us 45%, all school districts, 45% of what was incorporated in the House's reduced budget. That money was distributed to all the school districts in early January, which immediately alleviated some of the fiscal challenges that the schools were facing. However, what we didn't realize at the time was that was everything that was approved. Okay? So, unless something happens, unless either the House or Senate comes back and authorizes or presents a new budget to the governor, or there's some compromise of a new funding plan put forth, we are where we are. I don't believe this can be let to happen, because I think it's a disaster. But where we are right now is that we're getting, this is all basic ed funding we're going to get for this year, unless the House, the Senate, and the governor meet and change what's currently in existence. What I want to tell you is that for Pottsgrove School District, that's $4.5 billion that we have not got. Okay? Multiply that times 500 school districts, and you can see it's within. I don't believe that can remain. We had a budget presentation from Pottsgrove yesterday on what their spin on things were, and they believe that there's got to be some movement on this, but, you know, it's a kind of wait-and-see scenario. The second component component that's listed here is the plan common funding. And this is money that we get from the state to help us pay our debt service payments and all of our bond issues. While we aren't qualified currently on the high school project, all of our other projects that we've been undertaking over the last few years, we are getting reimbursement for. In the framework budget and in the budget that was discussed by the House, in both scenarios, there was the concept of borrowing money at the state level to compensate all these districts for it. However, when the budget was presented to the governor for signature, there was no legislation attached to it that had authorization to borrow. In addition to that, now that they're looking at this more closely, the state is realizing that there's a cost associated with the downgrading of bond rating over the last few years, which has gone about 3 times, I believe, over the last 2 years. So therefore, borrowing large sums of money at higher interest rates costs the state much more money. So the concept of borrowing is not currently in favor. So where we're at right now is, unless there's a supplemental appropriation approved by all 3 groups for plan code, which is what the governor is proposing at this point, or there's legislation passed through both houses and the governor. And the bond issue is planned, organized, issued, received, and distributed to the school districts by June 30th. We stand to miss $850,000 in reparation. This is a real possibility and a real concern. While we think there might be some meeting of the minds over the basic ed funding, there is significant concern over what happens with the plan common. So if both of these things happen, Pottsgrove could be out $5.4 million in our budget for this year. Hold on your hands and see where it ends up, but it's potentially dangerous.
Mr. Nestor, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to be this comment to tack on to what you just said. I think it's critical that the public understand that the utter irresponsibility of our state legislature to pass a budget has put many school districts in this state in dire jeopardy, and the only consequence will be the very thing that they all say they're dead set against, which is larger tax increases. It's a horrible situation, and while I'm tempted to put blame on one side of the dispute or the other, because I think there clearly is blame to be had, what I will say is that the public really needs to educate itself and vote appropriately this November, because the legislature is at least in part responsible for the mess that we're in. And I would encourage people to do their homework. And I will also say that an agreement was reached between the governor and the leadership of the House and Senate, and then that agreement was scuttled by the House of the PA House of Representatives. And certain members of the House voted in favor of scuttling that, including some of our representatives. So this would all be settled if that agreement had been honored by the people who made it. And I just think that that unless people make informed decisions, then it's just going to be gridlock forever, because they're going to see that there's no consequence. So, there, I'm done pontificating.
A comment, I agree with what you just shared, but I am hoping that at some point in your presentation, we're going to hear suggestions what to do with this crisis situation.
Okay, I wanted to just give you a quick walkthrough of where we were, where we've been, and how we got to where we are right now. in September, the state issues its Act 1 index, notifies all the school districts how much they can raise taxes that year based on their relative wealth or relative poverty. In Pottsgrove, we began creating our allocations and discussing the budget with our building principals and department chairs in October. We gave that group of people until December to meet with their staff, define their needs, define their budgetary requirements, and they came back to a leadership group, which was comprised of Ms. Fiona, myself, Dr. Shirk, Mr. Wagman, and Mr. Voorhees, to make sure that our plans were all working together and that they were geared towards accomplishing our overall mission and goals. In December, we also started putting together our initial salary projections for the year based on the staff that was in place at that point in time and developing a revenue budget. We also, let me back up, we took a step for the first time in several years here where we elected to pass a resolution to stay within the Act 1 index. So had we not done that, there would have been more dates and requirements that we had to follow, but by opting to stay within the Act 1 index, it allowed us to streamline the process a little bit. The whole budget timeline is linked to the primary election in May, which is typically in May, but in presidential election years, they move it up to the end of April, so that Pennsylvania can play a more prominent role in the selection of the people that will be on the ballot in the fall. In January, as I indicated, we have choice of making a budget available for public inspection or opting to stay within the index, opting to stay within the index. So now, we don't have any formal actions that are required until May. 30 days before we adopt the final budget, which we have to do by June 30th, we must adopt a proposed budget. So that'll be the next formal action that needs to take place. We have a lot of discussions that need to take place between then and now to see what we end up with, but that's the next formal action that's required. The index itself is composed of two components: the statewide average weekly wage, which is a Pennsylvania index based on salary levels within the Commonwealth, and the employer cost index, which is a national index based on the salary increases of elementary and secondary teachers across the nation. Take the two, it's an arithmetic average to get the index. Here's the history of Pottsgrove's indexes over the years. You can see it ranged from the inception of the index, we were around 4.4%, and we got to a low of 1.4%. This year, the base index is 2.4%. That's for the wealthiest schools in the state. Pottsgrove is deemed to be a little less wealthy, therefore we're able to raise taxes more. It's kind of a counterintuitive idea, but the poorer you are, the higher your more taxes you pay. So 3.1% is the index that we agreed to stay within.
I just have to say it. That's another reason to throw the bums out.
Looking at our revenues, I tried to make it simple. I'm going to go pretty quick because it's standard. But in Pottsgrove, like many other districts in southeastern Pennsylvania, the lion's share of our revenues are generated from local tax base. In Pottsgrove, 70% approximately of our revenues are provided by Pottsgrove residents. About 29% is provided by the state and 1% by the federal government. Here's an average, and you can see that revenues have increased over the years, but they're staying relatively the same proportion. What you will see here is that in 2014-15, there was a fairly sizable increase state revenues, which is the, I guess we call it orange or buff color line. That was primarily a one-time receipt of plan-con monies in the Ringing Rocks project, about $400,000 that were not anticipated to be received in that year. So if it wasn't for that, it would be a more gentle slope. This year, you can see that the state revenues are about equal to last year's proposal, and that's because there's been increases proposed for retirement contributions, which are very similar to the amount of plan that we got this past. From a local level, this tells you why property taxes are such a big deal in Pennsylvania. Of all of our local revenues, property taxes are our primary source, representing 88% of our local revenues. That's 88% of 70%. So that's a huge percentage of our revenue. So when they talk at the state level about eliminating property taxes, while it sounds like a wonderful thing, are they going to be able to give Pottsgrove back an equivalent amount of money to offset that 88% of our local revenue? A variety of sources of state funds. The basic ed subsidy is the biggest funding source for us in the state. As I told you, only 45% of that is what we received this year. We have not received more than half of our largest state revenue stream. We get subsidies for special education, transportation. The rental and sinking fund payments is our plan money. That also is doubtful for this year. The state contributes approximately 50% of our mandatory retirement contributions and our mandatory Social Security contributions. And finally, this regular block grant deposits. And this is something this is a map that I came across just last week that I want to, I haven't tried it today to make sure the link works, so bear with me. We'll see. It's not looking good. I'm just going to skip it. I'll explain to you what the map was. I apologize. But it was a map that showed the state and how much money, percentage-wise, the state gives to various community school districts in the state. And the darker orange you got, the higher the state contributions were, and the lighter the map was, the less money that percentage-wise the state contributed. And what was very clear in showing that the Northwest and the North were getting between 50 and 80% state contribution towards the budget. But the Southeast was white. In Montgomery County, we're probably one of the higher percentages of state funding, less than Potsdam. But in general, the whole Southeast was getting between 20 and 30% contribution from the state. But we're bearing a large portion in our budget load. Expenditure-wise, salaries and benefits are our biggest components, totaling 68% of our budget, followed by debt service and transportation and tuitions. Those tuitions are special education tuitions, charter school tuitions. That makes up a large portion of that. When you look at where we devote all of our money, 59% of the budget is devoted to supplies they use, all the repairs they do, and all of our utilities for operating our building. Debt service accounts for about 8%, which is relatively low compared to state averages, and you can see the rest. Technology, not 4%. Okay. What we're looking at in 2016-17 at this point, we've had some positive trends in Pottsgrove. Transfer taxes are up a bit, which we're hoping is a trend towards improving market values of our homes. At least homes are selling a little bit, whether they're selling at appropriate market values or not. Earned income taxes are up. Again, that could be a factor of a number of things, more people moving into the area or higher earnings. But we do feel it's based on a higher wage base rather than just a quicker collection period. And this year we've had some graduation of some high-cost students that we can reap some benefits from our budget. Our challenges continue to be, our biggest challenge continues to be retirement contributions and the level of salaries in the district. That's assuming we can count on the state giving us our subsidies. At this point, it's very possible that next year's budget goes much later into the fall again, because people are going to get for the election. And if there's a tax increase required, people who vote for it are going to have to do as well on that polls on November 4th and 6th. Overall, our total expenditures this year are increasing about $1.7 million. Oops, got carried away here with the clicker. A little bit less than $1.7 million. And two components account for more than that number. The largest component, obviously, is our retirement contributions, which are up just shy of $1.4 million. Yes, we are getting a contribution, half of that from the state, but when we look at total expenditure increase, this is reflected in there. And our salaries are up 2.7%, which accounts for $727,000. I do want to point out to you that there are no additional staffing requests in this presentation, and Dr. Sharp and I and Ms. Gill have been talking that there may be a need to add some staffing for special education. We're looking at two possible staff, trying to determine whether we need to. On the revenue side, we have $675 additional $1,000 from the state for teasers. We get some additional Social Security. And the last two are big question marks. I included an increase in our basic meal subsidy under the philosophy that the government has been very supportive of public education. However, you can't get everybody else to agree with them. That number is not reliable. It's not a big increase percentage-wise, but it's more than enough. And our rental subsidy or our plan kind of money, we're expecting to continue to get. It's not in the budget this year. I've had conversations with you all about once something leaves the budget or the use of one-time revenues to balance the budget, the next year you have to add it back in. If $300 million goes out of the budget, it's going to go back in.
You mean out of the state budget?
Out of the state budget,
Okay.
yes.
We don't have $300 million.
No, we don't have to. You do that. So where are we right now? So our current budget shortfall is about just under $1.7 million. However, we plan to use $900,000 of our users reserve to reduce the amount of tax increases we need. which yields about $785,000. If we were to raise property taxes by 2%, that would essentially balance the budget. We'd be off a little bit, but we're a long way from the end line here at this point. So this isn't saying we're going to raise the taxes 2%. This is probably the best starting point I've had with the budget presentation since I've been here. First year, I think it was 23%. That followed 3 consecutive no tax increase years, and when you do that, you have to pay the price at some point in time. I was letting you know. But we'll continue to work on this to see if we can get it down. But it's not a horrible situation at this point in time, assuming we can get the revenues from the state.
Actually, that was my question then. This can all go out the door at any moment based on what the state does, one way or the other, correct? I mean, it could be decreased at 778,000, or it could increase it, right? Yes. Okay, so we really won't know until we know.
The idea of getting everything done much earlier is a wonderful thing, but until we know anything, it's very hard to predict what will occur.
Sorry, I'm going to tack on to that then. You get the press is daily reporting on the continuing budget battle, and you hear everything, and I've read everything from this is going to go on. We could actually get to the end of this year without a completed budget, and the attitude of some of our legislatures is, well, the governor vetoed what we passed, so that's all they're going to get. And basically, it amounts to, what, about 50% cut in the state budget, if that were the case?
It's sizable. It's 55% of the basic aid subsidy line, so that's probably about $3 million.
So my question to you is, how long can we hold out without a state budget and even level funding from compared with last year, and when would we have to start considering really hard options like drastic cuts in order to survive? I mean, we're looking at the possibility of not even having the previous year's budget and then the next year's budget, and I guess I'm just want to get a sense of what you think our worst case scenario here is, because we've got to start thinking about it.
As I indicated earlier, that map that didn't show up. Since we rely less on the state revenue than other areas, we're down here in southeastern Pennsylvania, we're going to be impacted less severely. It's still very severe, but there's going to be a lot of people that hit the wall before last. And I'm guessing that when that happens, if that happens, there's going to be litigation against the state for failing to provide a free and appropriate education to students in Pennsylvania. It's going to be much bigger than us. Because we rely on our local tax base so heavily, if we can get to the property tax collection period year, we'd be okay for a little bit longer. I don't think we can make it. The timing of our disbursements is such that we have some large debt service payments that occur in the middle of August. And I don't think we will have cash flow to support those debt service payments. So if we get to May, and there's not anything in place, I'm going to be coming to you asking for a stopgap measure, either borrowing or taking out a line of credit or something to try and get us through to that tax collection period in August. But as I indicated, I serve on the state committee, and there's one one district that I was speaking with who had pledged their subsidies as repayment for the monies they borrowed in October to make payroll. So when the subsidies came in, they went back down. So they, for all intents and purposes, gotten the subsidies. And those loans are over. So they're out trying to borrow from the banks again. That same district was only buying supplies for classrooms if the business manager found someone to sponsor the classroom. If you need to get somebody to sponsor your classroom, you use the I think some people. What?
Where was this district located that you're speaking of?
Something. There.
You mentioned about borrowing, but are we expected to get this money back at some point? If not, I don't think it's borrowing that we need to be looking at. I think it's cutting non-required programs.
$5.5 million is most of our education programs. That is a significant portion. We have to pay our utilities. We have to pay our debt service. We have to pay our contracted salaries. There's only certain ways you can eliminate personnel. I find it hard to believe that the people who put in numbers would like that. But I think we need to be going down the road with our eyes open. This is uncharted territory. The budget hasn't been this late since 1971 when the Shadow Institute for Personal Finances. So it's a generation or more. So don't have all the answers because we've never seen it. To finish up here, if we were to raise taxes by 2%, that would be 3/4 of a mil increase and about $91 in the average taxpayer. I do want to give you some information on what, even though the governor didn't discuss anything in the budget address, later on today we were able to get some information on what was incorporated in the budget proposal. It's great, it happens, it happens, but we'll see how it plays out. The primary focus, as I indicated, was resolving the 15-16 budget impasse. However, its 2016-17 budget calls for a $2.1 billion increase in expenditures over the framework budget that was not submitted to him. That's a 7.1% increase over a budget that wasn't embraced. Calls for an increase of 3.3% in basic education funding. For Pottsgrove, that would amount to about $400,000. I really don't think if any of this comes to fruition, we may not learn about it until next December. The increase of 4.6% in special education funding, which would generate an additional $157,000. But it's not just education. The budget calls for increases throughout the budget. I mean, public health and welfare, even as strange as it sounds, to the House and Senate caucuses. There's increases in it's a very aggressive budget, and we'll see what happens. The other major thing is there's some charter school accountability built in, some reductions in how much districts will be obligated to spend for special education students that attend charter schools. Currently, it's a multiplication of what we pay for regular education kid, and it's developed based on how much we spend for special education students. But in reality, most cyber charter schools don't educate the severely handicapped kids that some public schools do. So it probably doesn't make sense to incorporate all of those costs. So we've talked of using the special ed funding formula that the school districts use to develop our subsidy, using that same program for the charter schools, which prioritizes funding based on the cost of the student. And also some other accountability measures that would be beneficial for us. So, we have to answer the questions, but there are a lot of questions.
I have two questions outside of the legislator part for our part. We have a surplus still from last year. Is that correct?
We had a surplus.
Had a surplus last year. How much and where is that funds located, and what are we recommending for those?
It's in the fund balance. A portion of it, actually the majority of it, was designated for a Kingsman reserve. So that will offset future increases in retirement.
And how much is left out of that?
We're proposing using $900,000 next year, and I believe there's 375 in this year. So that would be probably about $5 million.
Okay. Second question, because I know Rick's going to, I know what you're saying, but second question I have, and then I know what he's going to ask. We saw an audit back in December when we first started, and they were recommending $1.5 million be taken out of the self-insurance fund and to be used in another function. Are we considering that? And what are we looking at recommendation with that $1.5 million?
That is certainly up to board discretion. My recommendations would be doing one of two things. One is putting it into a capital reserve fund to defray future expenditures. We'll be talking next month about a long-term capital plan, and I think you'll see at that point in time that buildings are getting older. There's going to be a need for repairs and renovations that don't constitute an overhaul that you need to borrow money for, but are going to be costly. The second option, we can use some of that money to reduce how much our insurance premiums increase and how much we vote for longevity, kind of a rate stabilization to try and slowly consume that so it has less impact. The big concern, if we were to use that to have this back up, let's roll back a little bit before we get there. We've been using that cash. Okay? The money's in a separate fund for that purpose. But when you don't get $500,000 of revenue, you're borrowing cash from various funds to continue. Okay? It's a cash flow thing, not a revenue, not an expense, not a fund balance. You have to use what we have available to us. So, but if we use that, if we say we're going to take $1.5 million from that, and we're going to take money, we can't take it from the capital reserve, but take a fund balance and use that. Once that's gone, if you take $1.5 million out of this budget and don't cut the expenses, next year you're going to have to find $1.5 million to fill that hole, plus any salary increases, plus any retirement increases, plus any inflation on any other expenses. So, you know, my recommendation to the board is, if you really want to cut back on the program, do it. Don't try and milk it along, and then you end up at a point where it's going to be really painful down. Because it's not going to be anything better. And that's not saying I recommend cutting the programs. I think what our budget is based on is providing the educational experience that our students have experienced. We're not looking to add material additional programs to it, although we're assuming new high school programs and course of study. We're not adding a new curriculum per se. I'm trying to hold on to what we have.
Dave, what was the amount that we put into the Peters Reserve in December? Was it about $900,000? Okay, so I just wanted to clarify or reiterate that part of the reason it was put into Peters and not capital reserve at that time, although the administration did recommend that we put it into capital reserve, was because we wanted to let this body, not the previous body, determine what to do with those funds. We might choose to leave it where it is, but the reason it's in Peters is because if we choose to move it, we can, as opposed to putting it in capital reserve where we can't move it. So that is a decision that we need to make as part of this budgeting process, as we need to make a decision about that $1.5 million, so that we've got $2.4 million that we have to decide what to do with. And so maybe a subject for another night, but it's always a point of contention whether, when we have surplus funds, what to do with it, particularly when we're also talking about tax increases. So I'm sure we'll have more discussions along those lines as we try to work through it. One-time uses are what it's recommended that you use this surplus money to cover one-time expenses for the reasons that Dave spoke about, although I'll point out that if you used $100,000 a year to cover operating expenses, that of $2.4 million, and that's all you used, how long would that last, Dave? 24 years, yeah. So there might be a moderate approach that helps defray any tax increases, but also doesn't bankrupt us. And that's what I would be hoping for.
In general, what I've learned over the years is that slow and steady increases are much better than zeros and increases. And I think we've seen that in our community this year. And that's what I experienced when I started. Like I said, 3 years of net tax increase. It was over. Like I said, I started out at 23%, we got to 10%. That's a painful experience. We don't have that ability now, so I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that what I try and do in my budget plan is to spread the impact of things out over the years so it doesn't have any significant impact.
You say slow and steady tax increases are the least painful, or less painful, but the least painful for the community is the school district spending within its means and not continuously seeing a tax increase as a God-given right, but as a last resort instead. Now, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. The townships in our area are talking about raising taxes in the double digits. County's talking about raising taxes almost 10%. The administration keeps asking for direction, and we have yet to give it. I made a motion our first night to direct the admin to create a budget with a 0% tax increase. I couldn't even get a second on that motion to allow for discussion. We have a budget, a prelim budget, that is at a 2% tax increase that we can look at. I'm making a motion and asking for a second so we can have the discussion, because time is running out, that we direct administration to prepare a preliminary budget with a 0% tax increase to spend within our means.
Motion and a second. Any questions or comments?
Here's my comment, Bill, and I agree with you 100%, as in, and I'd like to see it, but I want to know what we're talking about cutting, because obviously you're talking cuts. What cuts are we talking about to get to a 0%? That's all. I need to see that before I can possibly approve something like that.
I'm not talking about cutting anything. We don't make those decisions. Well, we don't make those recommendations, we make the decisions. That's exactly what I'm asking for, Mr. Leach, is for us to see what it looks like. I didn't make a motion to adopt a budget at 0%. I made the motion on the table is for the administration to create a preliminary budget at 0% tax increase for us to review and discuss and compare to the 2% tax increase and go from there.
Now, I could make a motion to amend, could I not? You may. Well, I would like to make a motion to amend Mr. Parker's motion to direct the administration to present a budget in scenarios, including a 0% scenario, but also including two other scenarios. So we have a 2% scenario, so let's get a 1% scenario, a 2% scenario, and a 0% scenario, and see what that looks like in terms of the cuts. So I've made a motion. Do I have a second?
I'd second that.
So we have a motion and a second on scenarios. So procedurally, we vote on the amended motion first?
You may. You absolutely may, Mr. Parker. If you wish, you can withdraw your original motion. However, the amended motion is now on the floor. So we would vote first on the amended motion, and then you can simply make a motion to withdraw your primary motion.
Do I even need to do that?
Just to clarify the record. So we now have an amended motion, which is a secondary motion, which we have to act on first. So the motion that's on the floor right now is the motion as amended. So what we're voting on now would be on the amended motion as presented by Mr. Rabinowitz.
Are there any questions or comments about the amended motion?
Just to clarify, so what you're asking is for, oh, okay, I can't remember there just a moment ago, to prepare a budget saying, just so I understand, okay, this is where we are right now with 2%. With 1%, the only way it would be done with removing X dollar amounts, which could be this combination of things that we think might be the least painful, and then at 0%, something along that line? Just so, you know.
Well, to clarify, I mean, I didn't make it part of the motion, but what I would envision is serious contemplation about what would have to be done in order to accomplish the goal, not a scenario that is designed to scare the community, but rather a scenario that makes the best effort to evaluate what would legitimately need to be removed from the budget in order to accomplish that goal. That would then allow this body to see the consequences of 0% in real terms in the current situation, keeping in mind that, as Dave pointed out, we're starting from 2%, which is the best starting scenario we've had in a long time. And last year we started at much higher, over 3%, and I think it was 3.6, and we ended up with an increase of 0.55%. So it's a long road between now and the end of the year, and the state is such an X factor that I fear that my motion will cause unnecessary concern from the community, because at the end of the day, I expect the numbers to be much better than where we're at right now. They always get better. They never get worse. So, or at least as far as I've been following this. So without doing anything, my belief is that the numbers will be significantly better than they currently are at the current scenario. But I still think it would be a worthwhile exercise for us to go through, and that's my rationale. And it's not the first time I brought up scenarios either, I might add. It's just the first time I made a motion. So.
I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Rabinowitz. Can you just clarify? What I'd like to see within that is various scenarios. Is that what you're suggesting too?
My motion was 3 scenarios, current, 0, and in between.
What I mean by that is, in other words, so talking about the 0 or talking about the 1, well, you can get there by doing this or this or this. So we don't get something that comes back and says, well, you got to cut this. Like, as you said, we don't want something meant to scare the public. We want to see some realistic numbers.
Well, I think that we want the administration's best recommendations, and then we can discuss those recommendations and ask them to consider alternatives if we don't like those recommendations. But I still would like them to make their best suggestion to us, because they know the budget and they know what's the most important to the community, and so I think that you can accomplish that by virtue of whatever they choose. That would be my suggestion. Any other questions, comments? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Mr. Parker, if you wish, just to clean up the record, you can certainly, given the amended motion as approved, make a motion to withdraw your original motion.
So I made the motion. Do I need to make a motion to withdraw, or do I just withdraw it?
You may just state for the record that you wish to withdraw.
Right.
There's been to state that you wish to withdraw your motion.
I withdraw my motion.
Thank you.
And just one final question for the school board for direction. In prior years, we have had our department chairs make presentations to the board on what major components of the budgets are. We haven't scheduled those meetings yet, so I wanted to see if that's something you felt was valuable.
I personally think that they're valuable, and I don't see any reason why, as part of the process, we couldn't have the department chairs sort of fit into the scenarios that we're talking about as well as part of their presentations. I suppose that's up to you, years ago, in one of the first budget presentations I saw before I was on the board, there was a year where there was sort of, okay, you could do this, you could do that, or you could do that, almost in 3 scenarios. And I like the idea because it helps us, as I remember, for example, technology was looking for some things. I don't mean to single you out, Michael, but, you asked for the sky, but you also sort of indicated, some medium ground, and the board was able to see all those scenarios rather than just asking for the sky, So that would be my hope. Anybody else, feel free to comment. But
I agree. I would like to hear from the department heads, and as Mr. Rabinowitz said, hey, this is what we'd really like to have, but this is what we can get by with, and this is worst case scenario type of thing.
And I just want to add, I think it would be good to have when the department heads come for all of us to understand your role and where you're coming with your needs. It would give us some insight.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to action items, I'm going to make the recommendation that you approve the professional staff items as submitted, including the A page.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments?
Yes. Letter A, special ed tuition agreements.
I'm in personnel.
We're in personnel right now.
Well, you know me, I can never keep it. Once you start this stuff,
You want to hold off on that?
I hold off.
Okay. Any questions about personnel, Bill? We have a motion and a second. Any, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Motion to approve the support staff items as submitted.
Second. Have a motion and a second to approve support staff. All in favor? I'm sorry, any questions? None? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Motion to approve the supplemental special payments as submitted.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions?
Yeah, quick question, just, I see this all this time, I'm just wondering if this is normal. Do we usually have people that are non-staff usually doing these supplemental things? Like I see we have someone that's non-staff doing drama and someone that's non-staff doing spring club advisor. Is that just a normal thing we usually do?
Well, I mean, certainly I think it's favorable in some circumstances to have staff members who know the students, but oftentimes we can't get staff members to step up, and we have other community members that are willing and able to do them. So yes, it is kind of commonplace.
So we didn't have anybody that wanted to do those two areas?
No.
Do we, I'm sorry, do we actually post those then if we don't have a?
We do.
Oh, okay.
I'm concerned with the number of clubs that we're paying teachers for. Let me just be clear. I'm not bothered that we're offering different opportunities for students. I think that is excellent. I'm concerned in regards to what we're paying for that and the ability for the building administrators to properly supervise. A thought I had, and I would like to open it for discussion or to hear other thoughts on it, is the possibility of having the what do you call them, club supervisors submit a monthly report to the principals that they then review to make sure that the goals of that program are being met, that we don't run into a scenario where there's a supposed club happening, you know, students, whatever could happen. I don't even want to put it out there. That's a thought I had, so we have some level of assurance that these clubs are happening as they're supposed to be.
If I'm correct, and maybe somebody can help me, maybe Matt, you can help me. We meet with the athletic committee and the co-curricular committee at the time, and we review all these supplementals. And when each season is done, it's reviewed. Did we have enough kids? Did they, you know, how each worked out? Do we have the numbers to fill? Am I correct in that, Matt?
Right, we do review that annually. I think probably not to the extent as what Bill's asking for. I don't necessarily disagree that that's a bad idea either. I don't know the best way to frame it. You're saying a monthly report, but and we definitely don't meet that often. The co-curricular committee, but you're talking about a report to the principal. So, I mean, yes, we do. We review the list for appropriateness. I know, talking about what we're paying and how many clubs, those are all determined in pre-teacher contract, and then we're committed to that for the length of the contract. If nobody signs up for a club, that's one thing, but I don't think we can relook at that midstream. But I don't disagree with your train of thought there, Bill. I think it sounds like something that we could talk about.
Shouldn't I know how to press a button? Shouldn't we talk about this possibly at the co-curricular
Well, that's what I was going to suggest.
meeting that's
Yeah.
upcoming?
March.
I mean, I think that would be the appropriate place. And Mr. Chairman of the co-curricular committee, if you agree, then I think that would be a good thing to add to the agenda. Yeah, okay.
Moving on to miscellaneous. Oh, I'm sorry.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. Moving on to miscellaneous, recommending that you approve the miscellaneous item as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions?
Yeah, could you just, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with who Joshua Lindy is. Could you just explain who she is and why we're offering tenure? I don't know.
That would be
Well, he's a math teacher at the middle school, and after a period of years, 3, I believe, in the state of Pennsylvania, teachers by statute can apply for tenure. It's really an automatic granting based on the statute. 3 successful years, right?
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0, and congratulations to Joshua.
Moving on to business, I recommend that you approve the budget transfers for January as presented.
Motion and a second. Any questions?
Yes. I continue to be concerned about these transfers. My concern comes from the potential temptation to have the mindset of, well, such and such budget has this money that they haven't spent. Why don't we transfer the money from there to buy such and such, which we didn't budget for? That is my concern. I understand there's other reasons for this, but I would like some sort of stopgap measure, some sort of extra assurance that this isn't happening or won't happen in the future, which I think would simply happen. We're asked to vote on this. We're given a sheet that talks about transfers. So I'm going to request that or I'm going to ask if would there be any disagreement with the administration providing more detail so we understand the transfers that we're voting on, so we can make an informed decision.
I did send you, well, I did send the information about the transfers, but I mean, I think it's pretty unrealistic to ask an administrator to know exactly what to come out of every line item when you're asking them to submit a budget in October for the following school year, Bill. And I think what we tried to explain in the budget workshop was that, they have a set amount of money. It's just disbursement of it that wasn't exact. And, we would assume that there's going to be some movement there just because of the fact that you're not building a budget, 2 months before you use it, even 6 months before you use it, but actually a full year. And it's very difficult for us to plan appropriately, not knowing what's coming. So I don't see that as an issue the way you do. I think our principals are very astute, as our department heads are, in looking at their money and being careful with their money. But if there is an identified need, then sometimes we do have to make those transfers.
I agree with, certainly with the first part of what you shared and probably with everything you shared. However, we also have a culture in this district of spend what we don't have. We've heard several times, even a couple times tonight, from the business manager, who I believe does an excellent job in working with the numbers and doing as he's directed to do. But we hear comments about tax increases as the norm, not as the last resort. So there is a cultural spending issue in this district that needs to change, and I think this would help it. I don't think this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think this is asking for any crazy additional work. Certainly, Mr. Nestor is receiving this information when he's approving it himself, and I'm just simply asking that it be forwarded to us, so since we're required to vote on it. Does anybody disagree from the board?
I just want to make sure I understand. So you're asking so that when the department head says, I need to buy these books or pens or whatever the case is, and submitted, and there's not funds, but there's funds elsewhere, like you want to, like an itemized list of what was purchased? That's what I'm not quite sure I have understanding.
No, I don't have the budget transfer sheet right in front of me, but if you have that with you, what I'm referring to is,
I don't know which one, but so many.
see, that's the problem, we don't even know what it is. What I'm referring to is when the sheet, exactly, this form here. So what I'm requesting is, and suggesting is that we continue to get this, but with some sort of explanation. It might be simple as 3 or 4 words, whatever the case is, to be put on this document or somehow added to it. So the issue I often bring up here, and why I often abstain, is am not comfortable, and I don't think anybody should be comfortable voting on something that you don't have the full information on. So if we're required to vote on this each month, it's my opinion that we need to understand what we're voting on. I'm not asking for a lot of additional work. I'm just asking to have the information that we need to make an informed vote.
While I certainly want to provide whatever information you need, one thing concerns me about that process. When we have a building administrator or a department administrator that has an allocation, an approved budget, and something arises that they need to buy, but there's not sufficient money in their budget, currently I have the authority to say yes within their budget, okay? If that is not the way we want to operate going forward, it may take that individual a month to get authorization to buy something they really need to buy.
Quote.
Because you only approved budget transfers once a month.
Right.
So depending on when that need is identified, it could be a month of delay in that process.
Okay. Quote, recommendation to approve budget transfers for January 2016, end quote. That's a vote that we have to make. What I'm requesting is that we have the information to make an informed vote. So whatever we're being asked to approve, that we have that information. That wouldn't change anything that, any type of scenario that you just suggested, because we vote on this each month as it is. So I'm just asking that before we vote on this, that we know what we're voting on.
Doesn't the information that was provided to us provide that? I mean, what additional information would you like to see, Bill? Because I'm a little confused.
Okay, so take any example. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory because that's from the federal program to the regular program. But transfer to cover software requests. This is just an example. I'm just picking from the top of the paper. From one account to another account. I would simply like the information that Mr. Nestor was given, or a summary of that information, but I don't know how much detail he's given. Why are we asking to transfer this money from this account to this account? I'm not sure I understand why we wouldn't want the information that we're being asked to vote on. I'm just asking for an understanding of, I've already
From a
said.
process perspective, let me just make sure I understand something, Mr. Nestor. As you currently do this, we're sort of approving these transfers after the fact, are we not? You've already approved the purchases, because
Not necessarily the purchase, but perhaps.
Okay.
The reason it's being proposed, the reason the budget transfer is being proposed is because there's a need. So assuming I approve the transfer and the department is responsive, they would enter a requisition following that.
But at very least, you've already approved the purchase if you haven't actually expended the money, correct?
I put money into their budget line, and then they have the opportunity.
So for me, in order to accomplish what I think you're looking for, which is more control, I think what we would need to consider is whether we want to continue the process as it exists, because we're at the end of the process right now, and something of rubber stamp. I mean, if we didn't approve the budget transfers, then purchases that had already been made and would effectively be nullified, but they've already been made. You see the point that I'm making, right? So what I think we should do is table the discussion for a finance committee or budget committee discussion, or maybe a policy committee discussion, or maybe all of the above, so that we fully understand the process as it exists right now, and either ratify the existing process as a body, or modify the existing process as a body, because the additional detail may be useful for you, and if there's, I don't have an issue with that, but it doesn't change the culture as you see it, because the process won't be any different. Do you see my point?
I do see your point, and I do, and I don't think we're disagreeing with each other. We're just making different points. My suggestion, instead of sending it to a committee, because I'm not sure we have an appropriate committee for it, would be to direct administration to hear the concern, bring back a recommendation, because you bring up a good point, Mr. Rabinowitz, it's after the fact, but my concern still exists that we're still voting on something that we don't have information on. I'm not looking for more control, per se, quote unquote. I'm looking to be able to make an informed decision. So I would like the administration to bring back recommendations on, because they're the professional, you know, they're the ones that need to suggest, well, this is how it would work. If I'm going to make be asked to vote on something, I need to have the information to make that vote.
Bill, just a question. Now, I'm trying to make sure I understand. Let's say, for example, that particular books were needed. And so Mr. Nestor approved the budget transfer in January. We're going to take it from the high school. We're going to put it over to whatever line item is necessary so we can buy the books. And he puts that all on paper and everything. And are you saying that we would say no, they're not? They have to wait till we approve it before we actually say yes to it?
I'm simply stating, if I'm going to be asked to approve budget transfers, I need to know what I'm approving. That's what I'm asking. So that's why I'm suggesting that we put it back to the administration to bring us recommendations to answer these valid questions. What does that mean? What does that look like? All I'm saying is very simple. Yeah, I'm not a finance guy. All I'm saying is don't ask me to vote on something that I don't have the information to vote on.
I can tell you right now, it means you're waiting 30 days for the person to buy it. They have to get approval from us first then.
If you're comfortable voting on something you don't have information on, you can do that. I will not.
Rick, I do think we need to table this, bring it maybe to a finance committee for
Well,
further discussion.
I think we need to discuss it at a later date. But in the meantime, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments or questions?
Give me the motion again. For which one?
Action items.
Okay.
Number one. Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
Motion carries 7-0 with an abstention.
I'm recommending that you authorize the administration to enter into an agreement with Wood Services as presented.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any questions? Comments?
Yes. So this is a student that was just placed at Woods. Now they're asking us to pay additional funds for an aide. I'm presuming, no, I'm not presuming, it says in here that he's a special ed student. So presumably Woods was aware that of the student's needs. And I'm a little confused at how they can come back now. When I ran New Life, I couldn't go back to a district and say, well, you got to pay another $20-something thousand because this kid needs an aide. No. Did it say that in the IEP? Were they not aware of the needs? I'm not comfortable just, oh, sure, we'll spend another $21,000. Why not?
I think what happened is, as they got to know the student, they realized that they needed additional support. supports to help him be successful in the current situation. And at that time, that's when we agreed to put a date in place. This is a student that, without getting into a lot of details, was placed in the mental health facility. And it was not our placement, but it has significant needs. So it's a pretty atypical case.
So did we not know this student prior? I understand you're saying he came from a mental health institution. Was he or she not with us prior to that? Did we not know the student?
It's not a matter of not knowing the student. There were other situations that occurred with the parent and the placement, and then what happened subsequent to that was the safety issues became a mental health placement, not a school-based placement. I don't want to divulge too much information, so I'm trying to answer your question about.
Isn't it the fact that this student was moved from a more expensive placement to Woods, and money was saved in the move, and now this extra 21 doesn't put us back to where we were? We're still saving, just not as much. Is that correct? Okay.
I agree with that, Mr. Rabinowitz, and I consider that I'm just not comfortable. This is going to be ironic considering something we're going to be discussing later, but I'm not comfortable setting a precedent where a facility can accept a student and then turn around and say, well, we have your student, now you got to pay us another $20,000. Like I said, I could never get away with that at New Life, and I would not vote for that in this case.
So then you'll be voting no. Anybody else? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries 7-1.
I recommend that you authorize the administration to enter into an agreement with Eric Ryan Corporation as presented.
I want to amend the motion subject to solicitor review. Yes. So I'm amending the motion to that we're passing it subject to solicitor review. Can I get a second? Second. Motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
I recommend that you award the wireless access points bid to PC Mall Government as presented.
I have a motion and a second, and I have a question. Michael, can you just give us a brief understanding of what we're voting on here?
Sure. We are in E-rate season, and due to some changes in E-rate rules that went into effect last year, we are now eligible, we haven't been in the past, we're now eligible for discounted infrastructure purchases. We've lost eligibility, as all districts have, to other types of services, particularly telecom, but we've now put out bids for E-rate eligible infrastructure enhancements. What you're voting on tonight does not commit us to these purchases, but it is required so that we can move on to the next E-rate, next phase E-rate, which is the filing of what's called the 471 form. And that's essentially where we declare our vendors that have been approved. And beyond that, and our contract and our bid specifies this, any purchase will be, of course, subject to our normal budgetary process. So it just makes us eligible to move to the next phase of the E-rate process.
Okay, and these purchases, are they something that is in addition to what's previously been budgeted, or something that's already been budgeted?
The balance of, this would not be purchased until July, so it would be next year's budget. The balance of the cost, the part that percent you're not being reimbursed for, is in my current, is in my technology budget that's, that's in the budget that's proposed for the 2016-17 school year.
So some portion of this 40,000, if we did approve the purchase, would be reimbursed by this E-rate process?
Right, somewhere between 40 and students are eligible for free.
And to clarify then, right now, you're just asking us to approve this in order to move forward with this process, but we'll approve the actual purchase if we wish at a later date.
Yeah, through the budgeting process. You approve my budget, that's included in it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Why, it seems like we're constantly hearing of needing additional wireless access points. And I remember this being a discussion at the board when you all were first talking about the one-on-one computers. So is this, why do we keep hearing about needing additional?
Well, the last time you heard this raised was when we were in the early stages of the high school renovation. As we were renovating classrooms, we were upgrading the wireless access points to the latest standards. These particular access points that you're discussing tonight as part of this E-rate is for this building. Again, brings this building up to the same standard that the high school is currently being transitioned to over the course of the renovation. The access points that are in this building, I'd have to look back on, but they're at least five years old. So the standards have changed. The speed at which wireless transmission can be conducted has changed, and we had an opportunity to improve the infrastructure. So for example, these access points here can support, there's one in every classroom, can support up to 30 clients. The new access points can support probably 50 to 60 clients. It really is just a matter of better performance. Are we having any issues now? No, but we have an opportunity and we have a limited window with which to participate in this, in what's called Category 2 E-rate funding. And if we don't participate when it closes, we're back on our own. So we're trying to do, a measured, well-considered enhancement in phases throughout the district over a number of years.
This is a one-time purchase, correct?
This is one time for the next 5 years, yes. 5
Right.
years.
So it's not a continuing budgetary
No, it's just that we have 5 buildings and we have hundreds of wireless access points, and we just, we upgrade them over time.
So if we choose to invest in these additional wireless access points when the time comes, then we could consider using some of that surplus money that we were talking about to cover this cost, correct? Dave?
Yes and no. And as Mr. Wagner indicated, this is for this building primarily?
It's for this building, yes.
So we do have 4 other buildings that are going to need upgrades over time, or at least 3.
Three.
Fair enough. However, I would still suggest that this might be one of those moderate usages of surplus funds, but we can discuss that at a later date. Right now, all we're talking about doing is moving this process forward without making any commitments, correct?
Correct. We just need to file our 471.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
So the current wireless points that we now have in each classroom cover up to 30 items. The new ones will cover 50 to 60 in a classroom that has 20-something students. I'm going to vote yes at this point. I'm going to vote, if I'm hearing you correctly, I will absolutely vote no once it comes time for the purchase of it, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Well, there are a couple of things you consider, and obviously, vote as you see fit. But you're talking about classroom devices. We're also talking about a guest network. So every student who walks in with with some other portable devices accessing those wireless access points. We're also talking about changes in standards. So the speed of transmission is much better with with these access points that we're talking about. So there are a number of there are a number of factors, not just the number of iPads or laptops that that kids that we issue. There are all sorts of things that are competing for access point bandwidth, video streaming, for example. So those are just, it's probably not the best example, I gave you, but I was trying to give you the difference in the capacity of the access points, and there's a lot of variables that come into play.
Okay, so I appreciate that additional information. I'd like to move on. We're gonna, when this comes up for a vote that requires expenditure, I think that it would be good for us to get a good write-up as to what the advantages are and considerations are for why we need to do this now. Beyond just the obvious, we're getting reimbursement for it now and we won't later, possibly, or if that's the case. And then we can make an informed decision at that time. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
I recommend that you authorize the administration to contract for additional hours for record purging as presented. We discussed this last meeting.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions beyond what was discussed at the last meeting?
I'll be voting, sorry, I wasn't at the last meeting. I'll be voting no. We're already over budget on this. We have full-time staff, some teachers in the classrooms that don't have full schedules, some, not all. We, this board, last board meeting that I was not at, voted to spend roughly $1,000 a month, which to not have these paper reports, but to put it electronic instead. One thing I read was we're going to save all kinds of time for the administrative support staff. So it seems to me that they now have the time to do this. They should be doing it themselves. We don't need to spend the taxpayers' money on this anymore.
Any other comments or questions? Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries 7-1.
I recommend that you authorize the purchase of IEP Writer and PA web-based 504 module from Leader Services as presented.
I have a motion and a second. I have a question. Is there a cost here?
I think the cost is not.
Yeah, it's in your news and notes. It's $8,913 plus $800 for the training, and then the 504 module, $1,312 for 100 students and $2,755 for 200 students. So it's between that, depending on what we need.
The cost not to exceed $13,500.
Does this IEP writer cover GIEPs as well as IEPs?
It does.
And can you explain, I guess I'm not clear on what the advantage of this purchase is, and did we budget for this?
Okay, so we did budget. What we're looking to do is we are budgeted for this for next year. What we would do now is approve it, and then we would not get billed till the next funding year. Okay, and then what that allows us to do is not to have to run two concurrent systems during the migration of the data. So it actually would be a cost savings if we did it this way, because otherwise we'd have to carry our current provider and a new provider to do the migration next year.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Just to make sure, we're not using this system currently, correct?
We are not, and the problem is that we are running multiple systems to try to compensate for the current system we're using, and I think the other system, and maybe Mr. Wagner's better suited, is not currently up to keeping up with the updates. It's kind of a system that's no longer going to be stay current.
Yeah, it's not supported anymore, and it's also the one system that's sort of out there on its own. We're looking at integrating a new system with other systems to eliminate double data entry and so forth.
Okay, my concern is because just having gone through a couple of GIEPs, I know that while they're going through it, they said, well, this says this, but that's because the software only allowed us to do this, and it's really not that, but it's this, but it was the only option to select. So that's why I just want to make sure it wasn't the one we're using for this.
So this system will allow us to have more customizable functions. I didn't know that too.
All right, now I have a related question. Does this system allow things like copying and pasting from one IEP to another, or does it prevent that? Do you know?
I know that what we did is we had a small group of teachers come in and sit with us while we looked at the different options. And I know that was a concern that a lot of them had, so I'd have to check.
Well, I mean, it's not going to prevent me from voting for it, but what I can say is, following up on what Bill said, Jim said, the user friendliness of these systems, in some cases, from what I understand, has gone backwards rather than forwards. And I'm just concerned we're purchasing something that might be going backwards from a user friendliness. Because if it isn't, the problem is that, if you make it harder for the teachers to do these lengthy documents, as you know, then the result is more time expended on busy work. So we've evaluated this and we're confident this is what we need to do.
Yes, and the fact that our other system also is not going to continue to be functional. We're sort of at a crossroads.
Okay.
An IEP writer is the one that most of the districts use.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Were there any teachers special ed teachers that disagreed with this program?
Well, not of the ones that were there, and it was a small group, but we brought technology on, and we wanted to make sure that all of the different facets of selecting a new system could be accounted for. So,
It's also the same company that has a state contract with the services.
yeah, I don't know if did you?
No, you don't.
Just, Michael was also just reminding us that it's also the same company that has a contract with the state, with Leader Services. So, a lot of things that will be approved by this is when we do a child count or state reporting, it's going to have an automatic sync with what we're doing. We don't have that ability now. There's just many troubles with the system, which really presents challenges for compliance issues, even case management.
And this keeps up with the state changes, like there's a new NORA for gifted, for example, correct? Right. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
I recommend that you authorize the administration to execute change order request GC 095 as presented.
So moved. Motion and a second. Any questions?
Just a comment, this causes some great concern to me that they originally proposed $34,000, and we told them, no way, Jose, and then it came down to $12,000. My concern is how many other times has this happened and we missed it, or, where are they getting these crazy numbers, or am I reading this wrong?
Well, I think what you're reading is the prime contractor, and the contractor proposed it, but our representatives doing KCBA did their due diligence to work the price down.
Which is why we
And we
paid
have had ongoing issues like
which is why we paid $400,000 or so for Dewey to manage our project, and it's good to see that they're doing their job. And it's not the first time I've seen this since the project started. So that's a good comment. Anything else? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Recommend
8-0.
Oops, sorry. I recommend that you approve the payment of the invoices listed above.
So moved.
Payment of invoices. It's number 8.
Number 8 on the agenda. Have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
I recommend that you approve conference attendance as presented. C1.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments?
The first one, PDE is charging the $815, or is that for something else. That seems kind of excessive for a PDE conference. My second question to that is this something that oftentimes PDE puts it online after that people can go back and see? Is that the case with this seminar?
This is a multi-day seminar in Hershey to learn how to work with the PIMS system and child accounting systems to make sure that everything that we report to the state is appropriate so that we get the subsidy revenue that we're entitled to. So it's a multi-day conference with lodging. That's what.
For lodging?
Lodging is incorporated in that number.
Okay. I'll be voting no for that reason, and also I'll bring it up in old business in regards to we still don't have a plan in place for people that go to conferences to bring the information back and share it. And I'll continue to vote no until we have that plan in place.
Do you want to pull that one out, or are you saying you're voting no for all of them?
Because there's no plan in place, I'll be voting no on all, so that's fine.
Fair enough. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Opposed? Motion carries 7-1.
And we're now at committee reports. Policy Committee.
I'll motion that we accept the minutes of the Policy Committee meeting.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. All right, we're up to new business, and I'd like to cover an issue that was brought to our attention several meetings ago, I intended to bring it up last meeting and neglected to do so. So we have a taxpayer who came to us and asked for redress due to a situation in which she paid 3 tax bills early, as she always does, and made a computation error and paid $50 less than the total amount, which was somewhere in the $6,000 range, if I remember correctly. The tax collector returned the check because the tax collector can't deposit payments that are incomplete, and put it in the self-addressed stamp envelope that the taxpayer provided to the tax collector, and stamped it open immediately, but the open immediately stamp was partially obscured by a barcode that I assume came from the post office, and the taxpayer didn't open that envelope thinking it was a receipt, which was what the taxpayer thought was the purpose for providing a self-addressed stamp envelope, and didn't open it until November, when the tax collector sent another invoice for late payment, which included penalties for being late, and as a result, the $50 underpayment resulted in a $900 charge beyond what the taxpayer would have expected to pay from an early payment. I have thought very hard about this, and I've talked individually with several of you about this subject, and I know that we have some different opinions. There certainly are a number of extenuating circumstances, I think, on both sides of the House. I think that for me, a couple of the facts that persuade me that we should provide some redress to this taxpayer are the fact that we have asked the tax collector to not use these self-addressed stamped envelopes in the future, which implies that it does have a purpose, and in fact, it says on the back of the tax bill that the purpose is to provide a receipt. So in my mind, it was a reasonable expectation for the taxpayer to think that this was in fact a receipt, not a return check that hadn't been cashed. That fact, for me, coupled with with what I feel is an inordinate cost for a $50 adding mistake for a longstanding taxpayer in our community, causes me to want to seek redress. But since this is the new business, I'll say that I do intend to make a motion if somebody else doesn't. But before I do, I want to give anybody else an opportunity to speak their mind on this one.
Is this a good time for her to make her comment? She wanted to comment, right?
Well, I'm hoping that we can just settle this. If she doesn't like how we settle it, then by all means, we may hear what she has to say, because we already heard her in detail. I don't know if you were there at the time, but did I state the facts incorrectly?
I don't think you heard me in detail, but as a matter of fact, they hadn't told Mr. Nestor that I was coming that night. And as for today, they told me yesterday to be here tonight. And this is very important to me, $900.
Well, I understand it is, but I just want to make sure I represented the facts correctly from your perspective.
And
Okay.
I've got extra envelopes here from Berks County where I have a property and this county where consecutively I've done the same thing over and over again. I followed all the directions, and this was addressed to me, GC, I didn't even write my name, to GC from GC, and she wrote down here real finely, open immediately, and the post office stamped it out. I usually take these and don't open them and put them down in my tax papers for my accountant, and there's where the mix-up came in. But the check, she could have paid all my taxes practically except one little one with the check I had sent, and she sent that back in with the...
Right, we understand that, but the tax collector isn't permitted to make the decision as to which payments to apply. But trust me, we're going to be making a motion, and we're going to see how the board feels about this.
It is a simple phone call. I'm here 60 years. I had a big death in the family that I was responsible for hospice and everything. Is why I made the mistake. And 85 years old, give me a break. I mean, I think I do so darn good.
I understand that, and I'm empathetic to your point of view. I feel that I personally think that might have been an appropriate response, but regardless, let's get everybody's comments out and let's get this voted on so we can all move on. So does anybody have any questions or comments about this beyond what I've said, or any confusion about the facts of the case?
Yeah, I just have a quick question as into maybe someone can enlighten me. What is the normal procedure? Is a phone call normal? Is a phone call not normal? Is using the self-addressed envelope not normal? Not normal?
In 60 years, I've only ever had one phone call, and that was when Salem Ware was alive, and I just had to go down and sign a check or something like that. But in 60 years, I've only gotten one phone call. I'm a low-maintenance citizen, believe me, and I thought from June, I got this in December actually, from June to December was a long time. Just the phone call would spare me a $900 fine. And I've never paid a fine, and I usually get the discount. I can't remember how many times I did it, but it wasn't me.
I understand. I think that from what we learned, the tax collector does make phone calls in certain cases. When the phone number is provided to them and there's a problem, the tax collector also said this is a very rare occurrence. It's not something that happens frequently, and so from my perspective, this is a one-off situation, not a precedent-setting situation. Again, that's my perspective, and some of you may disagree, but what I think the other thing that is important to me is, was a good faith effort made by the taxpayer to do what they're supposed to do? If somebody were really trying to gum the system, they wouldn't underpay by $50, 3 different bills. And so it's just an unfortunate mistake that happened, and then a series of of events that magnified the magnitude of the mistake to the tune that a $50 mistake cost $900, and for me, that's just out of whack. So that's where I stand.
If they would have done it for one property, finding on one property, like to say, okay, that little property, that might have evened it out a little bit.
But again, we're told that that's not in the power of the tax collector. So the tax collector could have taken other measures, like calling you perhaps if the phone number were provided.
And not using my envelope.
And not using your envelope. Those are all mitigating factors that will hopefully lead to a motion tonight. Any other questions or comments?
Just a comment, and I understand, and I do feel for our community members, absolutely feel for them. I just have to try to decide, are we saying that our tax person was culpable for this possible mistake, the community member was culpable for this possible mistake, or it's a combination of the two and work something out in the middle? I just don't feel that it was our tax person and tax collectors' full culpability to this issue. That's my issue.
I don't feel full culpability, but I do think that, that there's no doubt that the receipt, that the self-addressed stamped envelope is earmarked for a receipt, and that it was a reasonable expectation that the taxpayer would have received a receipt. Certainly, she could have opened it, and she didn't, and she could have checked her bank account and didn't.
That's my very different.
And that's why I don't agree with full culpability, but I do agree with partial here. And again, that's why I would like to see us provide some redress to the taxpayer.
Just take the smallest property and fine you for that. But I never run out of money when I have a tax.
Can I make a request at this point, if the board can just discuss, and then we'll, if there's any additional comment from the community, just if you could allow us to discuss it for a few minutes. I think Matt wants to say something.
Okay, first I'll make a comment. Rick, I know you said you feel this is a one-off and it's not precedent-setting, but last year we had a one-off that wasn't precedent-setting. So I think the precedent that we set is that we're an open forum for people who dispute a tax bill or a tax fine to come in front of the school board. And I think we are setting that precedent, whether it's right or wrong. I absolutely think we are setting a precedent here. And we started that last season. But Dave, I have a question for you. My question is this: who is the authority on whether a tax bill is correct or not? So we're sitting here making ourselves judge and jury over whether a fine is right or not, or whether it's wrongful or not, and who's accountable and who's partially accountable. Is that our, where should a person go if not here to make that call?
And I can defer to Mr. Callis here, but tax collectors have a statewide association that sets forth.
They don't answer the phone ever.
That sets forth regulations for the collection of property taxes, and it sets their requirements, and they're very rigid requirements that I don't believe our tax collector violated any of. The requirement is that in this case that the incomplete tax bill is returned to the taxpayer with a notification of the error. That was done. It was done in her envelope, which has caused some confusion apparently. They further have a follow-up prior to leaning a tax bill in November to tell them that, you know, this is where we are. It hasn't been satisfied. If you don't pay by such and such a time, it'll be leaned with the county, and that's what, in this case, brought focus to this taxpayer. But there's a state organization that sets forth the regulations for them.
Okay, so if we're establishing that all of the laws were followed, nothing was done to break a law. My question is, if that's the case, and maybe you can answer this then, what is a citizens' recourse? Do they come to the school board? Do they go to the courts? Do they go, is it our decision to make, or where should they be? If here is the place that they should be, then we have a decision to make. But
I don't see where else she could go, but, you know, do you?
I don't know that there is any other recourse, that there is another place, but I will say to Mr. Nestor's point, you know, there are hard and fast deadlines for a reason, and I'm appreciative of the fact that the taxpayer sought to take care of her duties and responsibilities in paying that obligation in a timely fashion, but the fact of the matter is, the check could not have been processed. It was not permitted to be processed because there was a shortfall. The check was returned. I think that moving forward, it should certainly be made clear to the tax office that they should not utilize the citizen's self-addressed stamped envelope for that purpose. And I'm understanding and appreciative of the fact that in the past, perhaps telephone calls or courtesy calls may have been made in an effort to rectify the situation. However, that's not a requirement either. So it is obviously within the purview of the board at this point to make the decision as to how it wishes to handle the situation. But the fact of the matter is the taxes are due by a certain deadline. The tax payment that was required wasn't made, albeit by a mistake, but it still nevertheless comes with consequences. And although I'm appreciative again of the fact from the information that's been provided to me this evening that it was returned in a self-addressed stamped envelope provided by the taxpayer, certainly there's an opportunity on the taxpayer's part to open up that mail and see what's inside.
Okay, so, you know, that, the only thing I'll say also is that, circumstances, you know, I'm an HR guy, so I've been involved with a lot of policy writing. I'm also, and you know, policies are written with the intention of being followed as a general rule, and that's the perspective that you're espousing here. But I've never once been involved in the enforcement of policies that haven't come up against circumstances that were unanticipated when the policy was written. And to me, this is a case where a series of circumstances were unanticipated, and through no fault of the taxpayer and no fault of the tax collector, the circumstances ended up with a $50 mistake ending up in a $900 fine. You know, as for the precedent, the circumstances of last year's situation were certainly different from this year's, but I suppose, Matt, you make a point that by allowing discussion and considering and also possibly making refund, where allowing this to happen again next year with somebody else. But what I would say is if we hold a high standard and stick to our policies, except where there are exceptional circumstances that are credible, I think that we'll still be okay. When I make my motion tonight, or if somebody else does, I don't intend to offer a full refund. I intend to offer a partial refund as a disincentive to future people to try and play games by shorting their tax bills, you know, in order to take an interest-free loan from the school district. So
I should be allowed a word on this. I didn't get a notice until December. I immediately went to the tax office. It wasn't in November or October, like I said. And I can prove anything I'm saying about me being a caregiver that I'm a dying person and they died, that I made a mistake in the addition. I usually don't. I never even pay my sewer or anything late. I'm always a person that you don't have to harass or bother, and you're so short of money. I'm a person who gets it there on purpose.
Grace, listen, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you. So let's bring this to a close. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I have another comment, and I mean, I wasn't implying, and I hope nobody took it that way, that I think somebody's playing games, because I absolutely don't. What I'm saying is I think this is not a one-off. There are a lot of people out there who are facing fines because of one mistake or another, and what we are doing is setting a precedent that we will, if you feel like you don't deserve a fine for a mistake that you made or a misunderstanding, that you should come to the school board and they'll hear your case and pass judgment, and we'll be cutting partial deals galore going down the road here. I've been in this situation. Other people who have sat at this table have been in this situation. It never occurred to me to come and ask for forgiveness of my misstep. I paid the fine and I moved on. And I think by setting a precedent and open the door for anybody who's made a mistake or feels that a mistake's been made, that we'll have a whole session of people asking for relief.
Grace, listen,
Okay.
listen, let us finish.
Everybody, I didn't ignore this or anything. I went to everybody for help because I was under such duress.
Grace, listen to me. Either you let us finish the discussion and make our motion and make our vote, or we're just going to table this. We need that. It's late hour. We know your point of view. Some of us are very empathetic to you, but you're not helping your case right now. Just let us finish.
I have a solution.
Okay, Mr. Alexander, you make some good points. You commented about judge and jury and the things I hadn't thought about, and listening to the attorney, and, you know, is there somewhere for people to go? I believe in all cases there needs to be, if there's a ruling, a decision, there needs to be the ability to go back and appeal that. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, that is us. Precedent is always a concern of mine, as I stated earlier. Do we want to set the precedent? And my initial feeling was, this is going to set a precedent. That's not right. We shouldn't set it, or, you know, it's going to continue the precedent that was set last year. And as I think about this, and I hadn't thought about it prior, I think this is an important precedent to set, because if there is not an appeal process written into the law, and were it, then people should feel comfortable if there was something done improperly or unfairly or whatever, then there should be a way for them to be heard, in my single opinion, and whatever the case is, including this situation in regards to a tax bill. So we do find ourselves in the position of judge and jury, and I think it's important to, you know, where we can look at things as black and white, and I tend to look at things as black and white. We need to consider all the facts. For example, we heard, which everybody's doing, we heard, you know, were the procedures followed? Were the procedures followed? Excellent questions. Yes, they were followed, but were they followed properly? Is it proper to send a receipt back in the SACE envelope? We clearly feel it is not, as we direct, or the check back. Right. Do we send the check back in a SACE? Obviously, we feel it is not proper because we instructed and directed the tax collector, to cease doing that. With that in mind, I don't feel that we should even split it down the middle. We need to look at, as we're playing judge, intent as well. What was the taxpayer's intent? It is clear to me, and I think to all of us, that it was not her intent to you know, save $50, and nobody's suggesting that. Her intent was to pay her taxes on time, as she has always. Therefore, I feel, and I'm going to make a motion, that her full $900 fine penalty be returned to her.
We have a motion, and I will second the motion.
Can we correct it first?
Yes, the right amount?
Yes. It's $799 and a couple odd cents. I don't know exactly what it is. 66, thank you.
Motion is then for $799.66. Okay. Motion and a second. And do we have any other questions or comments before we vote? I think we should probably take a roll call on this one. No? Okay. Well, let's try it. All in favor? Aye. No. Opposed? No. 3 noes? Who said no? Motion carries 5-3. Congratulations, Grace.
You could have done it simpler. You should have just taken the last and the cheapest tax and just timed for that, keep that, and supply $50 for another. I really appreciate it because I'm frustrated. It's all through us.
moving on, I just want to make real quick, under new business, I'm passing out a paper to you that just shows you a little bit more about Remind. Not everyone has signed up, and I sent you an invitation today. So if you'd like to receive reminders from me, it's an app that you can either download the app onto your device, which works really well, or you can just receive a text message or an email. So the information's there for you, and if you have questions or you need help with it, I'll be happy to help you. But, you know, in the instance of the issue the other day when I wanted to get the information out about canceling the board meeting, I mean, certainly this would be the quickest way to do it without trying to make sure everyone's names are in the text messages. So
So just to be clear, you were buzzing me. Buzz like me.
I just said to say it 10 times. Thanks. We got it. Hopefully that's your name.
I signed up for the app, but
you can opt out, Bill, if you don't want to.
yeah, you got to be careful. What you don't want to do is allow it to send you all three. I mean, it gives you the option of sending emails, sending texts, and
This will tell you how to opt out.
yeah, just pick one. And live with it. It would be my recommendation. Otherwise, it'd be like when, you know how you used to have every phone number signed up for the phone calls from the district, and then your phones are ringing all at the same time. So it's sort of the same thing. Thank you. Anything else? Does anybody else have any other new business?
I have some old business.
Well, we're on new business now, so.
I know, but we skipped old. Can I go do a couple old
I'll
things?
do old after we do new.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to give a shout out. I attended the high school AP dual enrollment and STEAM night, and I was really enlightened. There was great energy, there was excitement from the parents and the students. There was presentations from all of our AP teachers. The guidance department was there. We had an AP student that spoke on behalf, and we also had a student that was doing a dual enrollment, that when she leaves the community college, she'll come out with an associate's degree. I was really quite impressed with that. Then they did, the Western Center was there, and they had all kinds of different presentations, and I did get like this cool magazine, but they did Legos and all kinds of things. So I just want to give a shout out to the high school. It was a great presentation. I really went in not really knowing all of this, and I came out really energized, like I wanted to go take a class. So I just want to give a shout out and say it was a successful evening.
I'd like to tag on to that if I can. I wanted to announce this last month at the last meeting, but I wasn't, I was out of state. Earlier, a couple months ago now, I had a student and parent come into the donut shop and request some donuts, and we started talking. And
Is that Paradise Donuts?
That would be Paradise Donuts, yes.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
You notice I had the pen.
They're really good. I like them.
Thank you. But anyway, you got my mind off track here. So this family was purchasing donuts for some staff. And I want to give a shout out to Dr. Ziegler, because they specified the people. The guidance department at the high school, Mrs. Ivans, SRO Slothauer, and Mr. Adams. This family, mom was kind of struggling not to be emotional, but they explained to me that they came from a private school. We just received an email from them, and it reminded me that I wanted to acknowledge this. So, but I wanted to say publicly to give those staff a shout out because they had transferred. They came in for a tour. Dr. Ziegler took his own time to personally give the tour, and they were so impressed with him and the staff that I mentioned, and just a thank you to them, and great job.
It was Mrs. Ebert, by the way, was the guidance counselor, and the email spoke about several ways in which Mrs. Ebert went above and beyond the call of duty on behalf of their family and the student, and I do agree that she's to be commended for doing that, and it really puts Pottsgrove in a very positive light when our staff do that for the families. So you know. Hear, hear.
I, oddly enough, can piggyback off that. The family you're speaking of they're my neighbors. We know them very well. Their son just sent me message. He's my dog sitter. He's my, they help us out a lot. He wants to attend some kind of law and like CSI seminar, week-long seminar at Georgetown University this summer, and he's looking for funding. I know he did like a GoFundMe page. Apparently the website suggested that they come to school boards and ask for money, and he reached out to me and he said, is this something that I should do? I wrote a letter, but I don't know, if I should attempt it. And I said, you know what, I'll ask. He sent me the letter tonight, and I'm pretty sure we don't have the means to give him any money, but do any of you guys have any ideas of like if he could like apply? He said there's no scholarships available, and they can't afford this 100% on their own. So I just wanted to know if you guys have any ideas of where he could, if there's any corporations out there or anything that like might give a small scholarship or some help, because they are a great family. He's a great kid, and his sister's, she's great too, and they're a good family. They're just
The only
good
thing
people.
that I would kind of recommend, because I've helped a lot of people in need over the years, is contact wherever the camp is. Write a letter to the camp directly, to the director, and say, here it is. And, just leave it at that, because you never know with them. They might have some money put aside for certain kids, and that's what I would recommend.
Ashley, I think I'd like to talk with you offline about it, because I might have some ideas, but I'd like to try and move forward. But let's make sure we talk. And I think that's a great idea, Patty. Any other new business? So now we're moving on to old business. It's counterintuitive.
Or at least backwards. Just real quick, just a thought to throw out there, and something that Mr. Leach brought up a few months ago. In regards to adding a foreign language, just a thought. If we have numbers at all for it, if the numbers only justify a part-time staff, what's the possibility of working with Pottstown? I believe I read on your report, they have some part-time foreign language staff. I didn't know if it's worth considering sharing a staff, if the schedules work out. Maybe that's just not something that's possible. I don't know. I just wanted to throw it out there.
I gotta say it's an interesting idea. So let's not discuss it tonight, but let's just make sure we do discuss it. Okay? Okay. Or maybe, and maybe if the thought is it's just not doable, then so be it. But next.
Quick question again. Have we lost any students this month to charter school? And if so, what was done prior?
I don't know that we monitor it on a monthly basis. I have the principals queued up that if someone should resign or withdraw rather, that they will address it, but they're not reporting that to me then immediately. So I'd have to go back and see if we had any withdrawals to be able to answer your question.
With the child accounting software we use and whatever else, it seems to me it would be simple to get a report of withdrawals that came in that year. Can we get that as part of, or that month, can we get that as part of our?
I can't give you student information.
I'm not asking for names, I'm asking for numbers.
Well, I guess, Bill, if there's 5 board members that would like that, but you have to understand that you keep requesting more and more reports, and that's going to take a staff person, because they have to track and
No,
put
it
them,
doesn't
print them
take a
out,
staff person.
redact.
If it's something that's already in there and in the system.
It would need to be redacted.
We get all this software requests, all these software requests. It's really,
I can't give it to you the exact way it would be coming out of a machine. First of all, someone would have to be charged with doing it, print it out, redact all the information that wouldn't be appropriate, make the copies or scan it or whatever we do, and then send it. So that's time. So if that's 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, I don't know, I can't answer that off the
Right.
top of my head, so that's one report. So then, now you're at, you have multiple requests out there, but I'm not acting on anything that's just coming from one member, so I'm looking to see what's really important to this board, and, I've given you reports on charter school, I've given you a plan of action on how we're addressing those.
My problem
give
is
you
I
follow-up
feel
reports.
too
It's
often
just
that you just cut it off as soon as you hear a report. The fact is, we get a monthly report of enrollment. We get these numbers. So those numbers are being pulled. I'm simply asking to know, we're seeing kids coming in. It's just as easy to find out who's going out. We spend a lot of money on charter schools. I've sat in the audience for months and months and months, hearing about the charter school problems, hearing that we were doing nothing to follow up with being proactive. Why are these students leaving?
But that's not true, we are doing some things.
No, I'm talking about the past. Now, we're starting to do some things, but it's willy-nilly from what I'm understanding. I'm simply asking for, we get enrollment numbers, let's see withdrawal numbers. The system says where they went to when it's withdrawn. I'm not asking for any extra work.
How hard would it be to take the information, as Bill suggests, and add it to our monthly enrollment report? Would that be an onerous thing? I agree that we shouldn't have to create a separate report that has everybody, redacting information. But at the end of the day, the question is, did we lose 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids to charter schools? And would that really be an onerous thing to provide to us on a monthly basis?
Dave, do you know what the system looks like, or we'll have to investigate that and come back, because I'm not exactly sure
Can
I
we
can answer that right
then what I'd like to suggest is that we find out if it's an onerous process, because I actually would like to know this information as well. It does impact our budget, and if we had if we had a better handle on it. There was a point last year where we found out we had lost a considerable number of people, and we found out at the end of the year that was the case, and I would have liked to have known it sooner. So I think Bill makes a good point here, and if it isn't onerous, then I would like it. If you would like us to make a motion, that's fine, Shelley, but I think right now I'd like to know, before we make a motion,
I can find out.
is it a difficult thing to do? And if it isn't, then let's do it, and if it is, then let's consider it further. Okay? Great. Anything else? Because you have your old business list. There's more?
Deciding what can wait and what can't, and I keep putting things off. I want to make a real quick comment. I brought it up a couple months ago when I was here, and Ms. Viola, my fault, you misunderstood what I meant, but what you shared was good information too. But just to clarify, learning walks that you had talked about in an email to us, you had said you're going to be using subs for the learning walks. Just me, but anybody can speak up. I'm against, I don't agree with using subs for learning walks. We need to use teachers that don't have full schedules to cover for classes. My other issue with it is our kids need their teachers in the classroom. There's already AM meetings built in other professional daytime where perhaps this sort of thing can occur, but we need to keep the teachers in the classrooms with the students and make use or continue to make use of the professional development time and AM meetings for those things, and not to spend more tax money on subs that are already hard to come by. Does anybody disagree?
Well, just to clarify, what it looks like so that you can make an informed decision here. We have maybe 2 teachers, tops, maybe 3, for each learning walk that might be a period of time. And the goal is, when we're looking at the schedule right now, let's just take Lower, for instance. It's an intermediate building. So we want to bring a teacher from the K-2 and a teacher from the middle school to Lower, and then a teacher from Lower who is on the team to do the walkthroughs, the learning walks, to look for the themes, to have conversation as a method of feedback and a method of learning and growing and seeing what we're doing, level by level. so that we have some consistency. Sometimes, you could hear about what they're teaching, but until you see what they're doing, and that's our intent. So we're not talking about a lot of teachers. At the middle school or the high school, we would probably look first to see if there's an open period that we can fill in a teacher, although contractually, if we take away their planning period, then we'll be paying them. If they happen to have a free period, then we can assign them, and we do that now. But the elementary school, that would be difficult to do because they have a full schedule, so we would have to have a substitute for that. So that's what it looks like, so now you can decide.
I guess my question would be, and I don't expect an answer right this moment, would be, do we have a sense of since learning walks have a cost associated with them, and the cost is the substitutes that we would need in order to do it correctly, do we have a sense of what the cost will be for the learning walks on an annual basis, or can you get us an estimate, rough, as to what we'd be spending, and if we're talking about $200 or $10,000, then that would make a big difference, right? So
Two or three teachers, and if you need a substitute, it's what, $100?
How many learning walks are
$100.
there?
We have this one scheduled, and then we're hoping to do another one in May, and we go to each building, but our goal is to try to get more than one in one day. Our first one, we have them set on different days, but they're not even a whole day, so we might only need a half of a sub. But our goal would be to streamline it so that we might do 2 buildings in a day, so if you pay a sub, then you can move them from one to another. So that would be 3 subs max a day, so that's, at the worst case scenario, $300 for the day.
And that's times 2, right?
That would be times 2, and that would give us 2 buildings. So that's $600 to do K2. 3-5 would be, $600.
So we're up to 12.
Middle school and high school might be a period or 2 of coverage if we don't have someone who's not doing something that can cover the class. So you're just paying a curriculum rate, $30.50 an hour on a timesheet for someone to fill in.
Okay, so we're looking at somewhere between $1,200 and $2,000 for this year's learning walks, probably closer to $1,200 based on what I heard you say. Additional cost beyond what we would already have expected. So, at this time, Bill, are you making a motion about that? Okay, so I think we can discuss it further as part of the budget process. It's a small item in a $65 million budget, but I think that if we're supportive of the learning walks, then we need to be supportive of the cost associated with it. And if we're saying that we're not supportive of learning walks, then obviously the cost goes away. I don't really see how we can do it properly without some substitution, and that's just my opinion. I'm just one. So, anybody else on this one? Bill, anything else on that one? Do you have anything else that you'd like to bring forward at this time, sir? So that's it. Is there anything else on our agenda, Shelley?
I got one more. I always say real quick.
You're like Columbo. Just one more thing.
One more thing. Board docs. I'm guessing I'm considering this is old business. So, do we have an idea of when we're going to be starting board docs?
I'm not sure that we've even gotten to board docs. Michael will have to answer if he's even had a chance to think about board docs.
Well, no, I think I would check with Mrs. Bicker.
Okay.
When we had the quotes, I think she was just, there is a it was a 6 or 7 week turnaround from build the site and do the training. I think we've already reached out, and I think that's being scheduled, but
She hasn't communicated that with me, so let me check
but
with her.
we'll check on that tomorrow.
I didn't know she was,
Yeah.
she had maybe that.
Can you let us know maybe next meeting what your guesstimate is as to when we'll actually have them in place?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
One other item. I guess I'm going to say this is probably old business. we have kids that are in 9th grade, 10th grade, and of course, that are in 8th grade that are doing course selection, correct? I understand we had tabled a certain item earlier. Are we going to have any issues if we continue to table certain items that they won't have the option?
Yes. Well, we'd have to make schedule changes later. If we decide to add a course later on, then we'll have to make schedule changes.
I think we should commit to getting this decided by the Tuesday meeting. If we do that, is it too late to add the course that we're speaking about?
No, we could talk about it on Tuesday, and you could give us the go-ahead to develop the course if it fits into the plan, if you accept the plan that we have.
But, obviously, we didn't finish, we haven't had the discussion in a way that we're able to make that decision now. So what I'd like to do is target that for Tuesday. And then, obviously, we'll just have to, well, we agree. So, is there anything else? I have one more thing I almost forgot. I'm withdrawing the second part. We do have an executive session after this meeting, but due to the late hour, we're going to defer speaking about labor negotiations until a future executive session, which will probably be after the next board meeting, and I'll announce it at that time. So we'll just simply speak about the personnel matters that I mentioned earlier in exec session. That said, is there anything else? Meeting adjourned.